going to be tougher because, yeah, they're that pre-rut, but they're not preoccupied.
You might go the next 3 or 4 days and just see very, very little rut.
X amount of years, and it was closed in the first week. Gonna be some hot heads.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin Fool magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin Fool today at huntinfool.com.
Welcome to another Built to Hunt podcast. Today I'm joined with the 𝗀cie𝗯𝗍, and we're going to be going over the December and January archery seasons down in Arizona. Now, for the most part, we've always went down during January seasons because that's been the best for rut. But this past year, Cody had built up quite a few points for deer in Arizona and realized that the 𝗀cie𝗯𝗏 or the Arizona Strip was not going to take place in his lifetime. So decided to burn them and go on a December hunt. And you spent how many days down there?
I think total we spent 7 days.
7 days down there, and you hired an outfitter.
Honestly, the biggest reason and that's the first time I've ever hired an outfitter, but the biggest reason is I went into it with 14 points. When I started applying in Arizona, I thought, well, I can get a 𝗀cie𝗯𝗏 tag. Or, honestly, those first couple of years, I thought I'm gonna hunt the strip some year. Someday I'm gonna get a strip tag. And then, by about year 5, I was like, I'm never hunting the strip. There's not a chance. And so then I started looking at the 𝗀cie𝗯𝗏, and it was near impossible to draw outside of, some of the archery stuff. I think there's some opportunity with lower points. And so then, and I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of opportunities to hunt mule deer. So I started looking at Coues deer because we've been chasing them with our bows for a decade. And, burnt all my points on a pretty good unit and hired an outfitter because I was like, well, if I'm in this 14 years, I'm going to try and get with the best.
Right. Well, it definitely kind of pointed you in that direction, given the fact that we had hunted Coues deer for so long, and we'd always hunted them during January, and just going into it, you always think, well, we see some pretty dang good bucks down there in January for Coues deer. We don't always get them, or very rarely get them. I mean, I think you took your first Coues deer with a bow 3 years ago?
3 years ago, yep.
And then I took my first Coues deer with a bow this year, and hunting them for a decade tells you, just how problematic it is or how difficult it can be. But on top of that, those weren't the biggest bucks we've seen.
No.
So to go in there and capitalize, and it kind of gets in your blood. You love chasing them, and you kind of like going down there. But realistically, with some of the changes this year that took place for that over-the-counter archery, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens, it's not if at this point, it's how much they're going to limit the amount of tags they sell to non-residents. But with this quota system in place, you might only have an opportunity to go down there and hunt in December with your bow. There is that rifle hunt going on, but you were down there during the last portion, or not the last portion. You went the first part of that December hunt and hunted the first part, and then Steve went back and hunted the last part of it. But we'll just give guys an idea of what the pros and cons are. What are you looking at facing going into a December archery hunt for Coues deer? Obviously yours was a rifle hunt, which, you probably look at that situation and you can say, well, I might have been able to get in there with my bow. Maybe not. But
it's still tough. So that December, and this is everything according to Cody. Where we were hunting, I would, as I looked at it, and as we were hunting last December, and, I've got a lot of experience in Colorado third season, and I felt like it was a lot like a Colorado third season type of rut situation where.
Like pre-rut.
Pre-rut. Yeah, you get to Colorado, and sometimes you'd find a buck sniffing around, or some of the younger bucks, but they're not full rut, right? And that's what our December hunt was like last year. Yes, did we see bucks around does? 100%. Did we see bucks that were locked up and sparring and, getting after it, and you can see the testosterone levels were starting to peak? Yeah. But were they rutting? No. And so I think as an archery hunter, that's not going to be as easy as some of those hunts we've been on in January. That buck that I shot 3 years ago, he was full rut with those, and the only reason I got him is because he hung around. After I'd kind of blown that stock, he hung around just to make sure that all the does were taken care of and gave me a window.
He was preoccupied.
The
does had figured you out.
Yeah, they were done.
Yeah,
they were done. But he was still trying to figure it out and gave me a small window to slip an arrow in there. And I don't think you're going to see you may find some of it. It's similar to Colorado. Every once in a while, you run into a big rutting buck.
He's found a hot doe.
100%.
He's preoccupied in that moment in time.
Yep. And but I don't think you're going to, if you're going down anticipating that on an archery hunt in December, I think you're going to miss it. I think, and honestly, the guys, one great thing about hiring outfitters, and especially good ones, they know so much, not just about the country, but the tendencies of the animals. And one of our guides kept saying, I'm indifferent on this December hunt because I feel like, and this is his experience, he felt like those big coups almost went into hiding, preparing for the rut. Like almost were conserving their energy, and they're a little bit harder to find, preparing for the rut that was coming. And he felt then in his past experience that he's lost, track of big bucks that all of a sudden just disappeared, and he felt like they were just hunkered down, waiting for the rut to start, saving every little last bit of energy.
So and these are bucks that he had kept track of throughout the early fall and the prior seasons, and had kind of knew of their whereabouts. And what he's saying is, going in that December hunt, basically they just got very difficult to find at that point in time. Probably still in the same area because Coues deer hang around that same home range, or a small home range anyways. But just given the fact that they really did just kind of pull into those little hidey holes, sounds like more of a difficult hunt. So let me ask you this. In January, typically, if you get there and it's hot, like the rut is hot, it's going strong, bucks are out, you will see bucks cruising. You'll see bucks rutting does. You'll see bucks. Usually if you find a little pocket of does, and Coues deer typically don't hang in big herds. It's one or two here. If you see a big herd, it's like 5 or 6.
Yep.
But usually if there's a batch of does like that, or a little pocket of does, you're going to see a buck or two within that landscape. More than likely, probably a couple or a few bucks running around trying them does. But it creates more issues, right? So now you have more bucks, more deer to deal with.
More eyes.
When
more
you're going
ears.
to them stocks. But comparatively speaking, how many bucks were you seeing on average on a given day, and how much harder were they to find than a typical January hunt where you're going down there and, it's still hard to find them, but.
So we got lucky. Not lucky. We worked hard. And so we were seeing a lot of deer. We were covering a lot of country. We had 3 guys glassing at every time. So we would probably on an average day, I would say we were seeing 15 to 20 bucks a day.
Wow,
so
that's
lot.
Good. That's
solid. We're seeing a lot. We saw a lot of bucks by themselves. We didn't see a lot of cruising, bucks out there cruising, and we had windows. And that's one thing that I noticed from the time that we've been down there in January. You take, for example, 2 years ago when you and I were down there and Huntin filmed the javelina, and we were hunting deer. Man, we were chasing deer all day long.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember you going down in that flat and chasing deer. The one with the coyote kept bumping that buck. I mean, that was 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
When we were there in December, and this could have just been the days that I was there, we had about a 2-hour window in the morning. Then we had that, that whitetail window of, when they get up and feed middle of the day and move around. and then maybe an hour at night. And so it was real similar to a traditional. It wasn't. We didn't have them just cranking all day long. Where you and I, when we've gone down in January, blow a stock up, we're on another stock within an hour. We've been driving down the road and seeing bucks cross the road, rutting does, and stopped the truck and started chasing them.
Yeah.
So that is a. The December, and maybe the later you get in December, the more opportunity you're going to have to find a rutting pocket of bucks.
Was it hot when you were there?
It was hot. Not incredibly hot.
Not anything that was abnormal.
No.
That would have been shutting them down. It's
I think it was average weather, and from what I understand and gather and from hunting with those guys, that's kind of what to expect. We did see a lot of bucks because we glassed a long ways. I mean, some of those bucks, I just kind of laughed. Like, why are we even looking over there? I can't get there in 2 days,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and just looking at the situations that you had at hand, if you're glassing that many bucks, and obviously it was a rifle hunt, so you're probably a little more picky with 14 years worth of applying. So there's a lot of those opportunities that you would have said, I'm not really interested in that buck at this stage of the hunt. Now, if you had an archery tag in your pocket and you were just down there hunting like we hunt in January, and it's like, okay, it's a decent buck, I'm going to go for a stock. Because at the end of the day, you have to put so many stocks in front of you ultimately to be successful, because there's just so many variables that can take over. And now all of a sudden you had control, but you have zero control at this point in time. Wind blows. So out of all those bucks, and I know it's kind of a hindsight type thing, but how many of them do you feel like you would have had an opportunity to stock in and actually put a decent stock during that time frame, given the fact that, could you see them bed down? Were they just bedded in a pocket and then you just have to hunt the pocket?
I think if you're hunting solo, maybe two. Maybe
two of them?
Two or three stocks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you had someone you were hunting with that could help you and keep track of an animal as you maneuvered some of the terrain, I think, honestly, we could have gone on a stock a day, based on the terrain and based on what we were doing. And that also looks at, quality level. If you're just down there to bow hunt, and which you and I have done a ton of times.
Yeah.
I did not shoot a monster Coues deer 3 years ago. And
right.
I'm not really, when I got that bow with me, I want to shoot a good Coues deer, but anything with 2 points on a side is in trouble. Yeah, it's an opportunity hunt. If you're looking at opportunity, it's going to be there. You're going to find the deer in December. I think the advantage that January hunt has, in my opinion, is those bucks are preoccupied. A little more preoccupied than I think they will be in December. And, we've been going down there for 10 years. And I think when we first went down there, we were there January 1st.
Yeah.
We had to be there January 1st. I can remember going to New Year's Eve parties and leaving at midnight so we can be to the unit early in the morning. We've gained more experience. We've even showed up and probably prefer to show up a little bit later in those seasons.
Just because the rut is going a little bit stronger. And sometimes it felt like the first part of January, which, like, if you're going to the very end of that rifle hunt, I mean, it's basically the same thing. Yeah. I mean, it's one ends on the 31st, the other one starts on the 1st. And it's a little hit and miss. Like, you can get down there and have, holy crap, like 2 or 3 days where you're just like, oh man, it's on, it's go time, and then you might go the next 3 or 4 days and just see very, very little rut. It's like, wow, I've seen 27 does today in different various pockets, and I haven't seen a buck yet.
Right.
Whether or not, like you say, there's probably bucks in the area, but I just know how hard they are to find in a lot of that type, that dense cover. It's just tricky. I'm just trying to decide whether, like you mentioned that there's deer in the area. So just because you see a group of bucks, or not a group of bucks, a buck here or a buck bedded over here, that doesn't mean that you only have to worry about that buck getting into. Obviously, there's going to be other deer in the area. So you're still going to have to compete with that, but at some Like, what really triggers in my mind is when you say preoccupied. And yes, you always have to worry about other deer, but during that mid-January when we're usually down there, we're worried about all the does because that buck is concentrating on the does. If they take off and leave, there's a good chance that he's going to kind of figure it out and then he's going to follow him. He's not running because he thought there was some danger in there. He's running because they're getting away. Whereas when you're there in December trying to put a stalk on, any little twig snap or anything like that, now that buck is on a swivel, and, man, he is alert.
Yeah, and they're a tough animal, you know, especially if you're not an Arizona resident that's keeping track of them and knows their habits because they are fairly habitual. But if you're coming from out of state like we do, and we go down and we hunt 5 to 7 days, and we haven't been keeping track of any animals, man, you just need every advantage possible.
Yeah.
I at least I feel that way to make it happen with a bow, and if you know the closer they are to the rut, the more preoccupied they are, the higher your chance of getting into that window, you know, that archery window is.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me about, you went on a solo hunt in January to a brand new unit you've never been to before, trying some new stuff out. What were the deer doing there?
I mean, realistically, it's very similar to what we found in the past. It's just you're starting from scratch, right? You're trying to figure out, okay, what pockets hold bucks, what pockets don't. Obviously, you're keyed into some of the water areas or the areas with dirt tanks or some type of water. So you got a pretty good idea if there's a decent amount of water in some of that desert landscape, there's going to be deer around it. But the one thing, like you alluded to, you don't really know what those deer are doing. Like, you don't know what their habits are. So when you spot them, or like when I first got down there, the first group of deer I spotted was up in a little canyon. I didn't know there was like where the water holes were in that canyon. I just know that there was a buck there was 3 bucks chasing 2 does. And they were chasing each other. They got wrapped up in chasing one another, and one of them ran another buck over the ridge, and then a smaller buck got in with the does and actually was chasing the does. And I'm trying to figure out all that chaos, where I needed to put myself, if I needed to wait and let it play out. You know, maybe those bucks will eventually probably circle back, but the does were starting getting out of there, and I knew that that's realistically what those bucks were looking at was the does. And so if they moved up and over the ridge, well, that more mature buck that was there that ran one of the other smaller bucks off, when he comes back and sees there's no does now, he has no reason to hang around now.
Right.
Or is that kind of his home range and he's just going to hunker down, bed up I don't know. So I'm trying to figure all that out. And eventually I went over there, got in the middle, had some does run by me and that smaller buck run by me. No shot opportunity, even if it would have been the good buck. But then I sat up there on that hill, and eventually I'm looking out across the flat by this dirt tank, just surveying the surrounding area, and here's that mature buck just lining out across the flat out below the ridges, going to get a drink. Turns around, then starts coming back. But I lost him in some of that desert floor. But that's the biggest problem that I found is I had no experience with these animals, at least in that area. I didn't know whether to hold tight, whether to try and make a play, and it's so hard because if you just sit there, you're never going to get it. It's not like I'm going after a certain animal, so if I blow that animal out, he's probably going to go over the ridge, but realistically, he's probably going to be somewhere in that area. I could probably pick him back up, but I'm not concerned because I can realistically probably go somewhere else and find another one. You know, it's kind of like antelope hunting at that point.
Yep.
You're just gauging all your opportunities, and, man, do I want to take advantage of this opportunity or do I want to wait back in the wings? And every time I wait back in the wings, I always think to myself, man, that might be the one chance I had. And I just blew it and sat here, and now that buck's over the ridge. And you start to watch it unfold sometimes, and you're like, man, he's just hanging out. Like, they stopped in that pocket, and they haven't moved for 2 hours. Well, then all of a sudden you start taking off, and you get in there, and it's like, well, as soon as you go, inevitably they're going to take off and go somewhere else. So you're thinking to yourself, well, I could have got there in that 2-hour frame. So there's a lot of judgment calls you have to make, not knowing the terrain or exactly what's over that other hillside, not knowing what those animals typically do in that area. And eventually, like the buck I ended up harvesting, I think it was a prime example of what happens when they get preoccupied. because I went in after another buck. About 3/4 of the way into the stalk, I watched the buck I'm going after move, and he follows 2 does through this little pass. He follows them. Well, now when he goes on that side of the ridge, I'm in a bad situation as far as, well, it's going to be a completely different, like, set of events and trajectory. I'm going to have to move around to get the wind in my favor now. So now I'm reevaluating, and then I see another buck in the same ridge with a different, like some other does. So he's just moving in, and he actually goes to the side of the canyon I want him on, that I was preparing to hunt anyways. Basically just tiptoed along until I finally got up to where I could see that buck. And just, you have to have luck on your side, right?
Sure.
I mean, just same thing as like when,
Well, especially a solo hunt like you were on.
yeah, I mean, things have to go your way. You can't control every variable, so just happenstance, that buck was the first deer I saw when I got in that canyon. He happened to be within range. He was already I could tell. I mean, I was on it's kind of some sandstone, and you know how that dry grass
Yep.
is and stuff growing through it. So he heard something, but every time he would kind of like kick his ear back to listen to something happen there, that doe that was on the other side of the ridge would move or flick her tail or do something, and immediately his attention would go back to her. So I had that on my side.
Yep.
So just that little window, he stepped out and I was able to get a shot. But had that been earlier in December and he wasn't preoccupied with that doe, that little like grass or something or just a little brush in my
Anything.
mean,
Even
he
your
would have
bow,
been gone.
Your bow squeaking a
Yes.
little bit as you pull it back.
Yes.
They're such an edgy animal. You know, you and I have talked a lot, and we've spent a lot of years, and I'd say we've gone to the school of hard knocks of Coues deer hunting, because for 6 years we just made every error and mistake in the book.
We didn't know anything.
We had no clue.
We taught ourselves.
We taught ourselves in 5 to 7 day windows on how to hunt Coues deer every January. But one thing we came, I think we both talked about this a number of times, is with Coues deer, and you'll see a lot of archery outcutters do this too, is you get into that 100-yard range and you put yourself in a position, and then we've talked about you just wait. Mm-hmm. And you hope, like you said with that luck, you hope that luck breaks your way, and for whatever reason a doe comes your way, or the buck chases a smaller buck your way.
Yep. You
put yourself in that position to get a shot. 2 years ago when we were down hunting, I made a stalk in on that buck and was sitting anywhere from 65 to 70 yards for nearly an hour. When all of a sudden another buck walked right up to me, and he was so close I missed him.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
I mean, the first shot was at like 8 yards as he was walking right at me, and that was getting in that almost that danger zone. And I think in January it's easier to get in the danger zone, and you increase your chance of something happening.
Yes.
In your, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Where December, it's going to be tougher.
Yeah.
Really is going to be tougher because they're that pre-rut, but they're not preoccupied. They're still looking and aware of everything that's going on. The other thing that I found interesting in hunting with those guys this year, and just, I can throw this out there, I hunted with A3.
Yeah.
Is they talked a little bit about that early archery tag.
You're talking
in August.
In August, September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked into it much just because we have so much going on. And it seems like that's just such a hard hunt to get down to, where December and January is such a fun hunt because of the time of the year.
Yeah.
But they've mentioned to me that when those bucks are early season like that, when they have that velvet, they're very keen on their habits. They're going to do the same thing every day or every other day, and there's a solid opportunity window for hunting with your bow. You just have to be patient. But it's another one of those things as a non-resident, it's hard to do that pre-scouting.
Yeah.
Where those residents are going to have that advantage. They're 30 minutes away from the mountain. We're 9 hours away from the mountain.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and realistically, we're close. Like
Right.
when you start looking at the whole demographic of the country, we're close.
Yeah.
At 9 hours.
Yes.
Some guy coming from Pennsylvania, I mean, he's just going to be 9 hours just to get to the airport, load the plane, get on the plane,
Yes.
fly down, get off, get a rental car. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about doing some early season scouting in the past, and the reality is it just is such a time-consuming task that we've never been able to fit it in. But it still piques my interest, especially if I find a year that, okay, I didn't draw any tags. I know there's opportunity. I can find something or an easy to draw. I mean, there's just so much opportunity with those archery tags.
Well, and this year with the quota being in place and such a strict limit on the amount of deer that can be harvested, obviously I think the mule deer is going to be a little bit bigger as far as filling those quotas fast.
Sure.
But if you that's a good point. That's obviously something, or that's honestly something that people don't pay attention to as much that are non-residents because they have other things going on. But now in this day and age, like, it's so hard to get a tag in your pocket in general. If you go down there and you say give it 7 to 10 days, you know what I mean, and you have that limited amount of time, you'll probably be able to learn some habits of some of those creatures or animals and put yourself in a decent position. And there's a pretty good chance that Coues deer tag or that Coues deer quota is not going to get filled during that early season.
Really good chance.
Yeah.
Highly likely.
The
that it
vast
does not.
majority, when looking at some of their harvest statistics, now granted their harvest statistics are what they are.
Sure.
I mean, they're not exactly the model of, like, as far as just having an accurate guesstimate. But it does say, I mean, most of what they have in there is that harvest on the archery hunt is December, January. Really weighted in January. I mean, it starts to ramp up in December, but so the August time frame, to your point, like, if somebody gets down there, it's a pretty good opportunity. It just,
again, I don't have a whole lot of. We've never hunted. I've never hunted that August hunt.
Yeah.
I know, they're harvesting a lot of big animals in August.
Yeah. Some of those velvet picks.
Yeah. So those guys that chase a lot of those trophy coues
Yeah.
with their bows. A lot of it's done in August. It's intriguing to me, but again, like I said, it's hard to fit that in. But if you like you just mentioned, if you have a year where you're light or you're looking for a hunt, a lot of guys are going OTC, elk, which is getting harder and harder and more crowded. I bet there's not very many people hunting Coues deer in August. I bet you have, run of the mountain.
I was down there in September a few years ago when Bill had that early rifle elk tag. And there was Coues deer there, and that was one of the more northern units.
Right.
I glassed up Coues deer in some of that country, and I was in pines. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't very excited about running across there if I had a tag in my pocket to try and harvest that Coues deer, just for the fact it was hot.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, even in the northern units up around Payson, I mean, it was hot. So I think because of that, there's not going to be a ton of people in the field, to your point, really chasing. And we've had some. And that's the one thing I will say is, well, maybe we should bring that up, but like January, we've seen the progression of this over the last 10 plus years that we've been running down there, and how many more people are taking advantage of it, to the point to where Arizona did institute that quota this year, just so they could still allow over the counter, but, kind of put a limit on how many deer can be harvested in there.
Yeah, we hunted the same unit for 6-7 years in a row, and I can remember we would see the same guys down there hunting.
Yes.
The old boy that rode his four-wheeler around, the other guy that had the crossbow, and they would come in, and we were like friends.
Yeah.
And then, as it progressed, all of a sudden, it was just jam-packed.
We knew pretty much where those guys were going to be camped, where they were going to be hunting. You could run down there and pretty much guarantee you could set your camp up within that first week,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with a
Mhm.
little bit of limitation there. I mean, someone might get in there. But holy cow, it got to the point the last time we went down into that same area, I mean, there was, I don't know, there had to have been at least 7 to 10 camps over in a fairly small area and hunting about 5 different drainages. Like, to the point where we went down south and we started looking for new areas because of it. We got down south and we still saw quite a few hunters.
Yeah.
I mean, we were. That's what's crazy is we were down there, and the last day of our hunt, we ran into Ron
Yep.
over on the other side, and we were like, "What the hell are you doing
From
down
Montana.
here?" Yeah, from
Montana.
And it's just like it has progressed, and it does get more and more. But how many guys did you see archery hunting when you were down there in December?
Nobody. So that was interesting to me. Is I can think of 2 camps, and we covered that unit and we hunted really, really hard. I can think of 2 camps we drove by that I think they were rifle hunters.
And there was very few rifle tags. That's the nice thing.
Yeah.
Was there 25
Yes,
or 35?
very
Someone
limited,
like
very
that.
limited on
Yeah.
on big units. So as an archery hunter, I was, as I looked at that, I'm like, oh, there's not a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that I do enjoy when I'm archery hunting, is when it started to get crowded, I can remember you and I sitting on a water hole or sitting, we were about 200 yards off the water hole, and you had that really nice 4-point muley that was working down with some does, and he was going to come right under you at 25 yards. Wind was good, and some other hunters saw it, and they didn't know you were there, but they made a play on it. Next thing you know, the whole mountain blew up. When you're archery hunting, it is fun to not have that pressure.
You're not worry about.
Yes, you're not worried about. Oh no, I got to race these guys to get there, and that just takes a lot of the fun out of it for me. So I think if you're a guy that's like, you know what, I would rather just have the mountain to myself and maybe take a chase deer that aren't they're pre-rut.
Yeah.
December's probably your opportunity.
Yeah.
If you're like, hey, I want to chase them around in the rut, I'm okay with a few people. January, because you're gonna see guys in January. We've seen them everywhere.
Yeah, and it is a few. Like,
it's not a ton.
It's all relative because it's not over-the-counter archery elk in Colorado.
No.
I mean, we're not comparing apples to apples here. It's apples to oranges. So, yes, you're gonna see people. Is that a daily frequency when that's happening? Probably not. It does depend on where you're hunting to some extent, like how far you want to venture off of a main road or trail or something like that. But yeah, you might have that 1 or 2 times during the course of a January archery hunt where you're like, oh crap, like I was going after this and this 4-wheeler went by and they buzzed them or they saw them, they took off up there. That might happen to maybe a couple. I would say on a heavily hunted unit 2 or 3 times out of the course of the entire hunt.
Right, and the majority of that's going to happen on a Friday night through Sunday morning.
100%.
Just because of the locals. That's an easy tag for them. They're going to go out and they're going to, hunt that the weekends. Not all of them, but the majority. So as you're looking at coming in and taking time off work and coming in as a non-resident, your real good window is Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Well,
now it's going to be Wednesday through Thursday.
Wednesday through Thursday, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. Well, actually, what does it be? Thursday through Wednesday. Because if that quota's filled, if it's open, it will run from that Thursday is a brand new, almost like opening day. And then if it's going to get shut down, it won't get shut down until Wednesday night.
Yeah, because there's a 1-week window. And then if it hits the quota, you can still hunt to Thursday. Wednesday.
Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Yep, and then it'll close.
And then if they don't hit the quota, another window
rolls
starts
over
on Thursday.
to the next week.
That's going to be really interesting to watch how that is received from hunters, how they, how can you imagine? I just look at us. We load all our stuff up. We get the okay from the wives to go down. We show up. We hunt for 2 days, and oh no, the unit's close.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, what do we do now? Can we go somewhere else? You know, is
Yeah.
there I mean, that's a whole X factor that we've never had to deal with in the past.
The good thing is we traded units multiple times.
Yes.
And I don't think we've ever really hit a unit and said, God, this is just void of life.
Yeah.
You know, and the cool thing is knowing that now, I think as long as you're flexible and like maybe have a few areas that you can, all right, well, this got closed down, this is my backup. Like look at the quotas once you go down there and it's like, okay, you know, I was planning on hunting 35B and that one got closed. Let me jump over here to 36B because I already looked at that. And there was more of a quota over in 36, so that's my backup one. And I'm going to jump over there and hunt that unit now. But I think as long as you have some of those backup plans, you're going to find deer.
No,
you know?
the deer are going to be there.
But, man, it sure throws a monkey wrench in what you had planned, especially if you're the kind of guy that's like, no, I just like hunting my unit. That's the unit I like to hunt. If I can't hunt that unit.
Well, especially if you look at those big units like a 23 or 27, and you're like, hey, that's my spot. And all of a sudden it's closed. You're like, well, you're 2 hours to drive to another unit.
Yeah.
Where, as I've been, you know, I was kind of thinking about this the other day, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, where can I be that I'm like within 30 minutes of 4 units?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where can I be like pretty mobile and mess around and have a few options so if something closes, okay, well, that sucks, but it's not game over. I'm on 27 or 23 or even 22 where it's just such a big unit that's like pack up camp, waste a half a day trying to find a new unit. You know what I mean?
Like, realistically, there's probably some spots down there where you could camp. Like, and then if you just jumped across the highway, you're in a new unit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
20 minutes down the road, you're in another unit that possibly still has a quota open. So you're a little bit more flexible. So you might not even have to move camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could even do an exploratory, all right, I'm going to run over here for the morning. It takes me a half an hour or an hour to get over there. Hunt it for the day. Man, if you do see a lot of animals, all right, I'm going to go back. I'm going to spend tomorrow, move camp, and head out.
Yeah, there's nothing more discouraging on a 5 to 7 day window hunt when you have to spend a day or even a half a day moving camp. And you're like, oh my gosh, world's over.
I know.
This is the worst thing ever. I hate my life.
Well, because all of us are on such a short, like limited time frame, realistically, that have jobs, family, things like that. Yeah, like say you kind of get a little bit of permission to run out there and do that. And any time not spent in the field hunting is felt like it's wasted.
Oh, it just hurts.
Like
It
you're
hurts.
just like, oh my gosh, I've only got this many days. I can't waste a day, but you have to.
You have to, yeah.
So
that'll be intriguing how, those bigger units, what happens there. Those units.
More popular units.
Yep, more
Yeah.
popular, and it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. I'm interested at the end of the year, end of the new year, right?
Right.
To see what units hit quota, what units didn't hit quota.
Oh, yeah.
And how that goes into the strategy for next year,
Because it's going to be what you're going to see unfold is more of the norm if they keep this quota system going forward. But, yeah, you'll be able to have a little bit more of a layout as to, all right, well, this one filled at this date last year. This one filled at this date this year. We can kind of expect similar type of things to happen in coming years. But the other thing of that is I think pressure is going to even get more so worse in some of those limited areas that are still open. And then it's hard to say how fast, because of the increase in volume of hunters, how fast those close after. So that December season, especially the first part of it, might be like that kind of golden window to get in there and have more flexibility to hunt where you want to hunt. It might not be when you want to hunt, but you'll probably have more flexibility to hunt where you want to hunt. It's just going to be a tougher hunt.
Let me ask you this, because we're talking primarily Coues deer right now, but there is the mule deer. Mm-hmm. And we've shied away. I think, 2 years ago we chased the mule deer around for a minute. We've shied away from those mule deer just because, there's such an opportunity animal for us in other states, and we've concentrated on the Coues. that time of year, especially January, those mule deer are dumb.
Oh,
So dumb. So I'm interested to see what happens for that quota on the mule deer.
I personally think, just after looking and studying some of the quotas, if there's anybody that hunts mule deer in that August-September time frame, I don't think they'll make it to January. There might be a few of them that make it into December, but I think those mule deer start rutting, at least from what I've seen, start rutting a little earlier than Coues deer. And most of those units, I'll be honest, you don't get more than a 20 deer quota.
So like those northern units, which those mule deer start rutting in December. I mean, you're thinking there's high probability that they don't make it to January.
I think there's high probability that northern units don't make it to December.
With those August hunts, August-September hunts.
The reason is most of the, at least from talking to the locals down there, most of the residents, they like to go north to hunt early archery if they want to hunt early archery because it's cooler, it's higher, it's just not as brutal of a hunt that early in the year, so they can see it more of a family outing, camping trip. It's just a little bit more enjoyable than everyone.
Elk are bugling.
Yeah, I mean, you get down some of them southern units, and now all of a sudden you're dealing with 100-degree temperatures in the middle of the day, and it's only cooling down to 80 degrees at night, so you have such a small window to capitalize on those animals being out and about. So, I mean, there's a lot of those guys that say, hey, this is going to be filled the first week. If you want to hunt a deer in 8, you better be there the first week.
Let me ask you this. If you're a resident guy, and we're just speculating right now, because we've had this happen to us in our careers, our hunting careers, where we've done it like this for 20 years, and all of a sudden the rules have changed. So the rules change. These guys have mule deer hunted. They've gone up family camp trips and shot mule deer for 20 plus, whatever, how many years.
Yeah.
Well, now all of a sudden they show up and they know there's a quota. Is it open game on any antler? Does your trophy quality or your goal as an archery hunter go down?
I think so. Don't you? I mean, I look at it the same way as when they have shorter hunting seasons. Yeah. Like when they have 3-day seasons in some of those areas in New Mexico for antelope, or 5-day seasons like we used to have here in Utah and in the way they do in New Mexico. I think what happens when you realize you're on a limited number of, like a limited amount of time, because realistically that's what the quota is doing. It's shortening your time because it might close.
Sure.
The first opportunity you get, it's like,
the first 1.5-year-old or 2.5-year-old mule deer, you
drill.
And I get it. Maybe you're a person that you're used to venison in the freezer every year from that hunt, and you've shot 3- and 4-year-old deer in the past, but you're not going to pass up on that venison opportunity.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Be interesting.
I mean, you might. What's crazy is this quota system. I mean, I know it's more of an opportunity type hunt. And that's what we've always used it to.
Sure.
But the more we hunt it, the more we're like, I'm going to get more opportunities. It's not like the only opportunity I'm going to get is that 2-year-old.
Sure.
I'm going to get another opportunity at something better if I just come out here, and just the longer I spend, I'm going to find it. But realistically, if guys just get in there and get it and make it happen fast and get them, like, they just look at those opportunities like, man, I might not have an opportunity next week to even be here because this quota is going to be filled. Now all of a sudden that guy is taking that, and these older bucks that used to get harvested in December and January, especially for a mule deer, and I think it could translate to Coues deer, although Coues deer is probably a little bit – I just don't think – I mean, it's so hard to kill a mature Coues deer with your bow anyways. But realistically, like we've talked about, some of those mule deer, I think they kill some of the biggest bucks, or probably kill the biggest bucks during that rut time frame with their bows. Because they are not the smartest animal in the world when they are rutting bucks, and they live in more conducive country that's more open, that they can glass. You can find them. Yes, you have to beat all the other eyes in the herd, but, man, those units down there, they might get really good for some trophy bucks. The problem is you'll never get to hunt them during the rut anyways.
That'll be interesting to see. I see a lot of guys showing up and saying, look, I just took a week off of work. I got the family here, and I'm putting some venison in the freezer.
Yeah.
I didn't come up here just to in the past I could come up here and be a little picky and have fun camping with the family, but now we're going to go make something happen, which, some of those bigger bucks all of a sudden make it longer. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, you put a little angst in people. It's going to be interesting with the changes they put in place and how long they're able to, keep that. And I'm sure they'll tweak it. It's the first year they put it in, so they're probably going into it a little more cautiously. So we'll probably see some tweaks throughout the next few years. And they might even scrap the system. They might say, you know what, it's not working out. We've got to do something different. Who knows? But
I'll tell you what, I'd like to be a fly on the wall for some of these public wildlife meetings that they have postseason.
Yeah.
That, if there's a couple of these units that hundreds of residents have hunted for X amount of years and it was closed in the first week.
I didn't even think about that.
There's going to be some hot heads.
Well, it's always like, oh, we got to limit the amount of people that are killing deer in here until you limit mine.
Yeah.
Like, no, you limit the other guy.
Yep.
That's why it's always resident against non-residents, because like the residents are like, no, there's too many non-residents coming in here now. It's way too many, and they're taking all of our opportunity. They're getting rid of all our deer. Like, we got to cut the number of hunters. And so they're like, well, we ran the numbers, and actually there's a bigger influx of residents, so we're just going to, like, cut that back. Well, even when they're cutting the non-residents going into this January season next year, some of these seasons are all going to be closed. And now all of a sudden you are cutting into that residence opportunity, and they're going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Well, you guys hit quota. But in my opinion, it's not the non-residents that are going to hit your quotas.
No.
It's going to be the residents, and they're going, non-residents, we come in and we hunt a lot, but it's like you and I. Mm-hmm. We've hunted over 10 years.
$2.
$2. So we're not the guys, we're not the guys going down and just really working it with our bows. Even though we've had plenty of opportunities, it's one of our favorite hunts. Yeah. We look forward to it every year. It's the residents that are going to hit that quota.
And realistically, they have the time to scout. They know the patterns of the animals. They are year in and year out the ones that are the killers. Those are the guys that are actually getting in there. They know how to hunt them. Like, they do it a lot. So, it's an interesting factor just moving forward into this quota system to see how it pans out.
Yeah, we might have to do an update podcast in March, April.
I guarantee. I mean, there's gonna be a lot. I foresee after this they're gonna have a few changes that they're gonna put in there based off of either public perception or actual, like, how did this impact the hunting? Right. How did it impact the populations?
Right.
I mean, you might even see this just them throw their hands in the air and say it's a draw.
Yeah, well,
you got draw
I
tag.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think honestly they have to be pretty close to that.
I feel like that this is almost, if we don't go to a draw, we're going to try this and see if this works.
Right.
Hopefully it does, and we can preserve the over-the-counter opportunity for years to come. If it doesn't work, we're just going to a draw.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
It'll be interesting. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Hope everyone listening to this got a little bit of clarity on the difference between the two seasons, what they can expect going into it. If you do have any questions going forward on this quota system and about some of these different hunts down there currently over the counter for Arizona, you can always give us a call here at the Huntin' Fool, and hopefully we can help you out.
Awesome. Good luck.